Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming. There's still a few people trickling in. For those of you who I haven't met yet, my name is Chris Fernari. I'm the editor of Brewbound.com, and we're here in Atlanta right now to put on our Brew Talks event. Obviously, you guys are all here, so you kind of know the deal. It's just an hour of free business discussion. We're taking this on a week-long tour for the rest of the week. We're going to be in Durham on Wednesday, and then in Lexington, Virginia on Thursday. We're going to be hitting Full Steam Brewery and Devil's Backbone. But tonight, obviously, at Sweetwater, so I want to say thank you, Sweetwater, for hosting us. This is awesome. Cheers to them. And I'd also be remiss if I didn't call out our sponsors who make this possible, Crown Beverage Packaging and Vicinity Brew. I think some folks from Vicinity are also here tonight, and they're in the back, so make sure you say hello to them. Without our sponsors, we wouldn't be able to actually get around and rent a couple of SUVs and drive through the South this week. So thank you. To my left are our first three guests this evening. Russell Farr is the owner of Greenco Beverage Company in South Carolina. To his left is Wes Anderson, a craft brand manager at Savannah Distributing. And to his left is Jason Ingram from Left Hand Brewing. Thank you, guys. So, yeah, how about a round of applause for them? So over the course of the next 30 minutes, what we're really going to try to do with this panel is explore sort of the current appetite for craft beer in Atlanta and throughout other parts of the Southeast, which is why Russell's here. We'll look at a variety of different wholesaler management issues. From talking with folks before we arrived, some things about the rotation mentality amongst beer bar owners, and also just how to earn a steady tap line, especially with some of the flagship brands. Ways in which distributors and craft beer sales reps can continue improving the rate of sale on those flagship brands amidst an avalanche of new SKUs hitting the market. Also, just when new breweries are sprouting up, how you stay relevant if you've been around for a while, and what retailers are really looking for. We'll look at some of the retail opportunities that are here in the Southeast, which ones are emerging, and how smaller craft beer operations can penetrate sort of the C-store and grocery accounts, even if they don't have, even if they're constrained by limited production or limited distribution. So let's just start, Russell, Wes, and Jason, if you guys could kind of go down the line, explain who you guys are, what you guys do, which brands you represent for the two distributors, and just walk us through and introduce yourselves a little bit. So we'll start with you, Russell.
I'm a distributor out of the northwestern part of South Carolina. We've been in business since 1916, started as a Chiro bottling company. We sell soft drinks and beer. Our large brands are Miller Coors, Corona, Heineken, Yuengling. We also sell about 60 craft brands and a lot of imports. Our main territory is Greenville. It's a very craft-centric area and growing. It's only about a 5 share of craft and growing every day.
My name is Wes Anderson. I work for Savannah Distributing Company. We actually have 2 warehouses, one in Savannah Distributing in Savannah, and also one in Atlanta, Georgia. I work out of the Atlanta location. Savannah Distributing has been around since 1938. It's a family-run business. We are completely independently funded. And you could say that we are very craft-centric, and we do beer, liquor, wine, non-alcoholic. The beers that we carry range from Bell's to Left Hand. Yep. Gotta drop the name.
You mention us.
You're sitting next to each other after all.
Yeah. Founders, on and on. I mean, we have the majority of craft brands in Georgia. We just kind of got in early on the whole thing when the laws passed in 2002 to raise the alcohol limit in Georgia. Personally, my background is in sales. I watch over the Midtown area, and I'm also a brand manager for Victory, Bell's, Allagash, and Lattice Imports. And previously, I have retail experience as a general manager of a craft beer bar.
Cool. I'm Jason Ingram. I'm the East Regional Sales Manager for Left Hand Brewing Company. Obviously, we're based out of Longmont, Colorado. I'm based right here in Atlanta. I cover Massachusetts to Florida, overseeing our distributor relationships on those areas, and then also our sales force on that side. Been with Left Hand now for 5 years, but I'm originally from here, so I have a really good understanding of the local market, but then everything else that's kind of taking place regionally as well as nationally.
So we'll start with you, Jason, since you have a little bit broader perspective on the entire East Coast in terms of how craft is performing in a lot of different markets. But what's the state of craft like in Atlanta right now, and some of the other key markets that you mentioned that you cover?
It's funny. As I mentioned, I've been with Left Hand for 5 years, and throughout my travel, there still is a small bit of stigmatism between the South, I guess you could say, and craft beer. We kind of lagged behind for so long that it's still somewhat our reputation nationally. But as you've seen all the growth in North Carolina with breweries popping up everywhere, and a brewery like Sweetwater that just celebrated their 17th anniversary yesterday, and you're not going to find too many facilities like this nationwide. Atlanta's finally starting to get its due. I'm all the time touting the Brick Store and the Porter and some of these other great beer bars as some of the best I've been to in the entire country. I think we're finally starting to land on that map.
And Wes, how about just locally? You mentioned a few, big, more national players that you represent specifically. Allagash being one of them. Victory, more Eastern, obviously. Bell's more Midwest. But certainly nationally recognized craft brands, even if they're not sold in all 50 states yet. What's the appetite like for craft here in Atlanta and Georgia specifically?
Well, I would say that people are very, Atlanta being a growing city that it is, it is made up of a lot of imported people as far as they came here for whatever reason, jobs and whatnot. And like Bell's in particular, I see people from Michigan all over the place, and there's a few bars on my territory that are dedicated, like Michigan bars, and they're very, very loyal to their brand. It identifies their home in the region. But in general, I'd say that people are eager to try stuff from different regions, and there's a term I call nostalgic beer. It's like, oh, that time when I was drinking that Founders in that place. Like, there's a lot of that goes around in the scene,
And Russell, how about for you? I mean, obviously, one of Sweetwater's earliest distributors outside of Georgia. What sorts of things have you noticed over the years as Sweetwater's been here, and how have you seen sort of the South develop in terms of their appetite for craft?
Well, I can speak from experience. I lived in Atlanta 20 years, and when Sweetwater, their first few years, I lived there for a while, across from Chastain Park Amphitheater. Had a lot of guests come over, famous musicians, drinking Freddie's beer. 420 was always in my refrigerator. I used to have to hide it because it would get, it was always missing. And back then, the only competitor it seemed like in Atlanta was when the Grateful Dead came to town and there was Pete's Wicked Ale in the parking lot. Freddie, one thing about our market, we're the largest, Greenville is the largest city closest to Atlanta. And it took Sweetwater 10 years to get to our market. And there's a lot to say for that strategy. They grew organically in Atlanta. They created a buzz. They had bands here on Thursday nights. It seemed like every Thursday night. And they just created a brand, and also with the help of United Distributing, they kept the gap between premium lights, or premium American lights, and crafts. There was a huge gap back then. But United helped them narrow that gap. And it's just a joy this is the first time I've been here to see their expansion, to see how from where they've been to where they are today. The craft beer scene today in Atlanta, I'm really not familiar with. But in the early days, if there's any brewers out here, if you're expecting branding overnight, it just doesn't happen. You can make good beer, but it's really hard to make it consistently and get that buzz going for that long.
Right. So just guys being out on the street, what are retailers asking for right now here in Atlanta and in the South particularly? What styles are hot? And what are the biggest challenges that you guys see out there right now?
Well, I'll start with style first. Despite there being seemingly thousands, IPA is still obviously the hottest category in my opinion. But I think you're starting to see a little bit of, you need to find your niche a little bit. Does the world need another American IPA, West Coast IPA? I don't know. If it's a great one, obviously. But I think we're starting to get to a little bit of point of confusion, a little bit of saturation. And so therefore, the market, which used to want to try every new beer that came out, well, now they're being bombarded with so many that they kind of stick with their standard. So we're almost kind of getting back to that, well, I don't think we'll ever be to that point where I'm a Bud drinker, and that's all I drink, or that brand loyalty that you see. But there is something to be said for knowing a consistent product and sticking with it. So if I know Sweetwater IPA is my IPA of choice, and yet I'm seeing like 15 new ones a week, and one's good, one's not so good, one's great, well, if I'm only going to have a couple beers, I'm going to have Sweetwater IPA because that's what I know.
So that's at the consumer level, but I mean, are you seeing retailers
No, but
kind of
that
adapt
leads
as well?
that leads to that point is retailers they want what's new and what's hot, but it's a balancing line for them to walk because then they also want consistency. And so it's very, very difficult for the retailer right now to make their proper choice. I know we're going to talk about rotational handles, and that's going to lead to that. But I think they're craving professionalism, consistency on one side, but they want new and innovative on the other side. So it's a really fine line to walk.
And Wes, I mean, I think that's probably something that you might be able to speak to pretty well. Having three, breweries that make some pretty consistent flagship offerings. I think of, Allagash White or some of the Bell's beers. Victory obviously has a few mainstays in their core lineup. The Prima Pills. Those are brands that have been around for a while, and Left Hand obviously, Milk Stout and the Nitro. These are brands that have been around a while. They've gained a reputation. They've gained a following. What's sort of the reaction from retailers when you're trying to sell those brands in and they're constantly asking for, like Jason said, rotation or what's new, what's hot?
Well, first of all, I think of the brands that you listed and of the beers that you listed, it's funny that we tend to gravitate towards those beers, and we know them as flagship beers. But I really feel that the evolution of the brewery at this point is to kind of fall into their niche, into the beer list of the retailer or the restaurant, in the sense that you have your Victory Golden Monkey, like they're an American triple at 9% at an affordable price, or a Bell's Two Hearted, which is their 100% Centennial IPA, or your Left Hand Nitro in a bottle. You know what I mean? Like, it's innovative, it's filled this niche, and sometimes you're carving your own niches, but that's kind of where it's gone, you know what I mean? People they want something, like you said, not another American IPA, but like, what is your story? Like, how do you fit on this menu that I'm going to hand to my customer? What makes yourself different,
So you're really just kind of letting the retailers guide the decision-making process then?
I wouldn't say that necessarily, but...
No Jedi mind trick?
No. But my presentation to my retailer is certainly customized to what they're doing and the products that I have to offer and what area of town that they're in, and what I feel is going to fit, and to make a more well-rounded menu,
Russell, you got 60 different breweries that you represent, you said, and Greenville is a developing craft market, still you said only 5 share. What are some trends that you're noticing there, and does anything that these two guys have said sort of ring true for that particular market?
Well, it seems like there was a hoppy trend going on, that's continued. And then regional, of course, seems like millennials, apparently 350-mile radius is local to them. So a lot of bars, restaurants, tap rooms are looking for anything regional, or what they consider local, and sessionable. That seems to be the new thing, sessionable. They realize they can serve a higher ABV beer as an appetizer before a meal than maybe one with a meal, but after a couple of them that are higher in ABV, it seems like they want to lean more towards a sessionable beer, and that's what we're seeing now.
You're seeing retailers look for those types of products.
And a lot of retailers that are growing the tap rooms, and a lot of it's being chain driven. Tap panels are being purchased.
So that seems like a good point for me to let you guys know that we're also accepting audience questions. If you guys have anything you want to toss my way, you can do it by tweeting at us using the hashtag BrewTalks. You can also email us on your phones as well by just emailing ask@brewbound.com. And then if you guys want to text it as well, it's just 650-BREW411. But probably email and tweet is the easiest. And I'll get it up here and I'll be able to ask these guys. So fire away on the pay-to-play questions for Russell, it seems. But, moving on, sort of, getting back to this point of, our main discussion topic, rotating handles sort of versus flagships and walking that line, as you guys said, and sort of finding the right balance with retailers. What have you found especially difficult when you walk into a retailer and you have a Milk Stout Nitro or a Two Hearted, and they're still looking for flavor of the week? I mean, how do you get around that? How do you jump over that hurdle?
Here's what I'll say about rotational handles is, first of all, when I walk into a place with it's a total rotational bar, I'm initially excited about that. That means I have an opportunity right out of the gate. There was nothing worse than 7-8 years ago where someone would have their entire list set and not make any changes for 6 months or a year. And you happen to be your one time able to go see them, and they're like, hey, I'm going to redo my list 6 months from now. Come see me then. So rotational handles, at the minimum, I see as a good thing as far as at least being able to get an opportunity to get in there. But if you're a brewery that relies on your flagship, which I think a lot should and do, it can be frustrating if you're in these accounts that they put you on every now and again. So you have to really tailor that sales call to what that account, you know what that account needs, and that's rotational beers or something new and exciting. So it may not be that you have the same beer on all the time, but if you're able to satisfy that quest or that thirst from them, you're able to maybe maintain that handle by having something that rotates in yourself. So it's a rotational handle, but it's a left-hand handle, or it's a Bell's handle.
But are you maybe less inclined to give up some of the special offerings to a new retailer that hasn't been supporting a flagship?
Sure, because right now with the growth of craft, I mean, some of these specialty item beers that we don't make that much of. So it really comes down to a production issue that if for someone that's new and coming right into the market and they just want to cater to every whim and they don't even know their business model yet, I'm less likely to say, yeah, we're only having 10 kegs come to the state, you're going to get one of them. I'm going to take care of the people that have really been supporting Left Hand for quite a long time. And the thing is about that, though, Chris, is you got to make that kind of known to them up front. I mean, we're all talking every sales aspect about managing expectations. And as long as you're up front and honest with them about it, I think that's okay. If they get bent out of shape at that point, then we'll see how long they're in business anyway.
So what are your guys' expectations when you earn a new account? And let's just say it's an on-premise rotating bar. What are your expectations? You finally get a shot at that handle.
I'll let Wes jump in, but I'll just say, because this really goes to everything we're talking about today. Sales matter more now than ever. We've gone from, just personally at Left Hand, we've gone from 5 salespeople to 25 in the last 5 years, so we're adding about 5 a year. And a lot of that, and we haven't opened a new state in 4 years, a lot of that is because we want those relations. It's still a relationship business at the end of the day. And we are shrinking sales territories, because we want to be with our retailers as much as possible. And so when you say, if I pick up a new handle somewhere, yeah, it might rotate in and out, but I want to make sure they see me or they see some of my sales staff on a regular basis. So it's about service now more than anything. And if you're looking for a way to differentiate yourselves, that's first and foremost.
Feet on the street.
Absolutely. I think we've grown by And the last 2 years that I've seen, or 2.5 years, we've added about 20 salespeople to our force, like going 60 strong now, and still going. There's still room for potential there, but it is all about the relationship for sure. The flagship is still very important, and that's something that the breweries know, and so does the distributor, and so that's what we go out talking about with our customers and our relationships. And we understand that the specialty beer is something that is desirable for the accounts, but that should be the incentive, and us as an industry need to come together in that, and basically, don't just give your best beer to someone that is not showing any loyalty, because you have to kind of train your retailers to understand that, like you need to support what this brewery is, what they do. You need to sell their story, and that's what the consumer wants anyway. So most often I think when it comes to specialty beers, the approach that we try to take is one of loyalty, but also you can do package sales. Like, all right, well, if you want this specialty beer, well, then let's talk about what else the brewery offers. And over the next month, let's try and hit, these highlights. And, we'll throw a case of that, or a keg of this, or a sixtel of that. And that's kind of how our approach has been on that,
You mentioned a couple interesting things there. One, selling the story, and two, sort of walking the retailer through the portfolio a little bit. How do you effectively do that when there's 50, 60 plus brands in your book, and when there's not necessarily in this state, but 2,900 craft brewers out there? I mean, how do you tell that story effectively when there's so many stories?
I've seen personally more events than I've ever recall. Retailers and restaurants are doing beer dinners, beer pairings, educational courses, and again, that has to do with the number of reps on the supplier side, on the distributor side, out on the street, pushing these types of things. But you also your buyer has become more educated and more motivated to do these types of events, and that's where the story gets told. Also, just on the menu, the printed menu, the printed menu has changed from small text of this brewery and on the back of your food page, on your food menu, to now paragraphs describing certain beers, which is great.
And it's about redundancy, like I was talking about. It's about coming back. You may not be able to impart that story the first time to have them latch onto it. You need to hit them again with it and come back, and it's we're in a type of business when you're probably not going to get a sale the first or second time you're in the door. So it's about coming back and maintaining that consistency.
Russell, you're awfully silent over there, and that worries me. What do you have to add to this conversation here?
Well, let's get back to the rotation. We have rotating accounts. They're called growler stations. We refer to them sometimes as gossip stations. They're in the business of getting the most eclectic brand on the wall, maybe 3 different brands in one tap handle in a day. But as a distributor, we're in the business of building brands. That's why we've been around since 1916. And to build a brand, all these occasionals and one-offs and special seasonals that breweries come out with, those should be treated as rewards, like these guys are saying. And you earn the rights to carry those brands. And it has to be manifested up front with these guys, or they'll tweet, get on social media and say, and just bash you, and it's always the distributor's fault. But those brands, it's all about building brands. It is. And as far as feet on the street, that issue, we have a saying around our organization. I probably shouldn't say this, but I will, and you know me. But Boston Beer, they're 3% of our business, and we see them 97% of the time. But as you see, their product gets on the shelf. There's a lot to say for that. Sweetwater has a great rep. For quite a while, we've had a rep, and there's a lot to say for that. And distributors need help. We have ADBD, attention deficit brand disorder, I guess. Come up with an acronym. We can't stay focused on 60 different craft brands. And if a distributor says they can, they're lying. But that's where the feet on the street helps. If a brewery can spend the money, not only just on branding, but in their existing territory, especially where they have started, it's very important to get out and speak to retailers and get your brand out there. And as far as problems we have getting brands in, our problem, because we have so many, is which one of our tap handlers are we going to take?
Right.
And that's pretty easy. You just look at scan data, well, in a bar it would be different, but that's our perplexity as far as which our own tap handlers usually we have to take off.
Something that's slower moving, I would
Yes.
imagine. It goes without saying. So what about for some of the brewers in our audience that maybe don't have the resources to support the market quite yet with multiple sales reps, or maybe even one? I mean, maybe it's just, a couple guys getting started, a couple girls getting started, and it's just them. They're brewing, they're doing the accounting, they're out there selling. How do they get your attention? How do they get the retailer's attention?
I think success stories or track record, and the way you establish that is you start small and build a nice base of customers and move out from there, rather than trying to go all over the city of Atlanta and trying to add here, add there. Like Wes used to be the beer manager over at Cypress Street, like I was talking about, great account. And if you can go into Cypress Street and get regularly poured there and service them and continue to come around, and then sooner or later, a lot of customers come in there and they notice said beer is on all the time. Then take that into your success story up the street and be like, we dominate down at Cypress Street. You guys should really have us on. It's the same thing like when I tell my sales reps that are going into a new territory for the first time or a new area. It's like, start with 5 or 10 accounts and build those 10, because they can only be there every couple months or so.
Right.
Rather than go everywhere, really start and focus narrow and work out from there. So if you're somebody that's a brewery owner or just getting into it and you don't have a full-time salesperson, and you're going out yourself, concentrate on 2 or 3. That's what I would recommend.
Wes, within your organization, how do some of the smaller brands earn your guys' mind share so that you guys are out there, advocating for them on their behalf?
Well, there's a lot that the small business, brewery can do to help a distributor help you, and then that's ultimately what we're there to do. Distribution is not just dropping off beer and taking orders, but it's also having a sales force. Like when you decide to go through a distributor, you have a sales force out there pushing your beer and, like I said, telling your story. So there's things that you could do from your computer at home that can help, as a brewer, and that's supplying materials for your sales reps, such as like sell sheets and cooler displays or price tags or pamphlets or anything to help the presentation of your sales rep that's out there representing your brand. I would say definitely that, and also just you don't necessarily have to show up and have face with 1,600 accounts in the market. You could at least show up to the sales meeting of the distributor who is out there pushing it, and if they're familiar with your face and you give them the material and you put the beer in their hand and let them try it and tell them your story, like email your PowerPoint presentations, they're going to go out there and do that. Like
we sit down with our distributors every year and kind of go over what we're planning on doing the following year and so forth, an annual business plan meeting. But one of the aspects of that is how often do they want to see us in a sales meeting? Is it once a month? Is it once a quarter? And so forth. But even if it's just 10 minutes, but getting in front of a distributor's sales force on a regular basis or however much it's convenient for them is vital, because there's turnover. As he can attest to the fact that he's got over 60 brands, a lot gets lost in the shuffle when new seasonals are coming and so forth. So it's constant communication. So if you're one or two guys, make sure that the sales force that is out there representing you, you may not be able to hire somebody, but you've got this distributor that is out there, make sure they're armed with the best and most recent information. And answer your phone. That's the big thing. Call people back. Come through for them. Be an asset.
Right.
So I would just add and summarize, like, don't necessarily think about it as managing your market, manage your distributors first and foremost. Yeah.
I use that term, managing distributor. Wow, okay.
No, I mean, it's
That's
true.
good.
Like, and going with that, it's like monitoring your sales numbers, having sales goals, following up with your brand managers or whoever it is, supplying materials, presenting at sales meetings, That's all that's involved in managing a sales distributor,
So I'm curious here because we have three different perspectives here on the panel. Brewery affiliated sales rep, distributor affiliated sales rep, distributor owner. What is sort of, if there is a magic number? I mean, what is sort of the limit of number of craft breweries that a distributor can effectively represent? I mean, in your guys' mind, before they start getting, what'd you call it, AD, BD?
Attention deficit brand disorder. I don't think you could put a number on it. It seems like the brands we have, we're focused on it, and I'm not lying when I say that. They're mostly regional brands and a lot in the top 30, but they're the brands themselves. They're all increased. If they're up 20%, that's probably we're doing okay. Those are brands we've had for quite a long time. Most of them are a much larger increase than that. So they're all doing well. We turn away more brands than we take on. And when I say that, and that's important if you're a new brewer out there, especially in states where you don't have self-distribution, it's very important, number one, to make good beer. That's the most important thing. Number two, make it consistent. We have a lot of brands, and I'm not going to call any names out. I'm not an expert on tasting beer, but it's inconsistent. And some of them, they'll brew a beer and it's inconsistent, and they'll just put another name on it, and it just adds another SKU to our some West Coast brewers. I'll just say that. I can say it in the Southeast, but it's about. If you're in a state where there's no self-distribution, if you're not making good beer, then it's going to be hard to find a distributor that wants you, and you won't have a distributor. That's a problem that I've never heard before, and you're going to see that happen more often in states where you don't have self-distribution, that you can't find a distributor. And that's usually because you're not making good beer. And I've seen some big buzz brewers locally in the Southeast that everybody's as the buzz. All they're making. I shouldn't say the style because I'll probably call the brewery out. They're making great beer, all these different kinds of beer, and then you hear a month later, oh, it's not the same. It wasn't consistent. So it's like a roller coaster, and that I don't think will carry you very far. So if I had advice, just make good beer, and the distributor will pick you up locally, and choose a local distributor. Don't choose a statewide distributor when you're starting out. I've seen a distributor in our area make the mistake of choosing a statewide distributor for the sole reason of getting a creditor to lend them money 2 years before they even started the brewery, and took it to the creditor and said that we have statewide distribution. Well, that's backfired on them because this distributorship doesn't have the scale of resources that a local Miller Coors or a Bud guy has in the market as far as in our region. So that's a big consideration when you're starting a brewery. Especially in states where there's no self-distribution.
I would totally piggyback on what he's talking about, quality. I think the two best things that a new brewer can do, one, as he said, first and foremost, make great beer. Because with 1,700 breweries or 2,700 breweries or whatever it is, plus another 1,700 in planning, that's going to be a huge separation point for a lot of people. So first and foremost, put everything you have into your quality.
That's square one, I think.
Square one.
Yeah.
And then square two, which a lot of people don't talk about in this industry, is watch your finances, watch your margin, make sure you're making money. So many breweries like us are in the regional category are adding capacity at millions of dollars cost, and some of the young startups are going into debt to do it. We're all experiencing these nice 30 to 50% growth numbers, and craft itself is 15% or whatever it is every year. What happens if that shrinks to 4 or
Right.
3. And we all have this excess capacity, and we all have millions of dollars leveraged. It's going to be an interesting shakeout at that point. So if you're not making good beer and you're not watching your finances, it could be real tight.
So no magic number.
Oh, well, no magic. Well, I kind of agree with Russell. It's like, it's basically, I'm in some houses that have hundreds of brands, and I'm in houses that have a few, and I've seen it work well both ways. It really comes down to how the organizational structure is, and
Where do you get the best attention?
you know, it honestly depends on the individual distributor and their leadership, and how it really starts at the top. So to his point, when you're making that decision to sign with a distributor, do your homework, do your research, get out in the market, talk to retailers, ask them how their service is, and so forth. The appropriate number, you know, it's really kind of an imaginary number as far as I think what's appropriate and what's not. I often look at distributors, and it's the same thing with, they need to walk a fine line. It's like, man, I don't want to miss out on the next Sweetwater or Terrapin, but at the same time, like, I don't want to take my mind share away from my sales crew to go after this little brewery that might be out of business in a year. So they have a tough decision on which brands to make. So
They could be helping to build the next Sweetwater
absolutely. So they
Terrapin
don't
already.
want to turn down the next big one, but at the same time, they could also invest and put time and resources into something that's not going to be there. So they have to make the same educated decision that we make. And signing them, they have to look in, okay, what are your finances? You know, what type of beer are you making? Is it, you know, what's going to be your market position? All those different factors, they have to now make that decision as well.
So you mentioned something about, you know, managing finances and being sort of cognizant of that end of the business as well. And there's an interesting question that we received here, and it's similar to that. Do craft brewers have the sales information tools that they need for reps to be highly effective with distributors and getting info to retailers to sort of, you know, either help the sell-in process or help continue owning a tap handle or continue owning the shelf space with IRI data or whatever it is? Do craft brewers have that information?
I can speak for us. We're a client of VIP, which is a company up in Vermont that basically pulls distributor sales data and then uploads it to us on a daily basis. And formerly, before we were a client of VIP, I'd get monthly depletion reports. If something were happening at one of my top accounts, it'd be weeks before I knew about it in some cases. So that's a great sales tool. It's a great organization, but it's a value add. It's something you have to pay for. So you have to kind of weigh out can I afford this on a monthly basis? Because it gives me information in real time, and I can react within the market a lot quicker. I think it's invaluable. And so that's been a tool that I think has really been a game changer for us. Scan data, same type of scenario when you're in the chain world. It's a necessity.
Russell and Wes, I mean, does that influence your decision when you're looking at brands?
Absolutely.
When they bring that to the table, I mean, are you willing to, you know, I guess take a risk on a brand that isn't bringing that, you know, to the table when they're pitching you the brand versus a guy who might have all those resources already?
One thing that's changed the game is guest metrics. Since they're tallying a lot of restaurant information, but I follow my gut. A lot of the brands, because it's just a small community. You say there's 3,000, but a lot of those include brew pubs. But I go to the CBC, the GABF, and anything involving craft, and I know a lot of these guys because a lot of them are my suppliers and partners. But it's just a gut feeling. You know, you see like a Cigar City, for example. They have an end cap at GABF, and they have these long lines for most of the people from Denver that attend that event, and they're creating a buzz. There's a lot to say for that.
I think it certainly has a play into things. And, you know, as Jason is saying, creativity and your beer, your liquid is number one. But, you know, these are all startup concepts from people that are leaving careers to start a business in beer. And, you know, their togetherness and you know, how they've organized their business plan, and definitely plays a factor into if we decide to pick them up or not. It's a huge thing, and it's not to be overlooked. But you know, sometimes you're just a creative genius, and You have long lines at GABF, and you just happen to submit that year, and then you have the desirable thing going for you, but you've got to invest into your organization and into your business, and this isn't like homebrew. We're not selling homebrew out there. We're selling professional breweries.
Yeah.
Most of the guys that approach us have a common thread. They're usually an engineer type, or they like to tinker. One of our largest regionals, a lot of them don't fit the mold except for that common thread. Oscar Wong, he's 73 years old, from China. Grew up in Jamaica. He went to school at Notre Dame. He doesn't fit the mold, but he's an engineer type, and they have a passion for brewing. And my point is, they have a lot of them have a passion for brewing, but they don't have a true business background, and that's where a distributor can help, whether it's incentivizing them with marketing support or even dunnage. I've had that a lot lately, but that's only on brands that have the branding and make good liquid. You don't just do that on every brand that comes along. But yeah, that's skin in the game. I'm seeing that a lot recently.
From the distributors.
The demand from the suppliers.
Right.
But and I understand that. I get that.
Sure. Just a couple questions before we wrap things up and refill our glasses here and get on. I know 30 minutes is not nearly enough time to cover all this ground. We sort of touched on it a little bit, but this idea that there's a finite amount of shelf space and tap handles, and there's so many brands out there, and we've kind of been on the fringes of the question, is it craft versus craft now, or is it craft versus Anheuser-Busch, Miller Coors still? The rhetoric is certainly there that, we're trying to take share from the big guys, but is that still happening, or are you replacing a tap handle with your own tap handle, like Russell said earlier?
I went to a CBC seminar, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, and it was about the San Diego brewing community, about how they have all these fantastic breweries out there, which they do, and how they all get along so famously. And it was all, and the weather is also 80 degrees in San Diego every day too. I mean, it really was, and no one really addressed the issue in the room of what we're about to talk about, of how there are only a finite amount of taps right now, or they're expanding, but we're outpacing the consumer as an industry, and it is getting more competitive. I still think it's about going for that conversion of Bud, Miller, Coors, or the big guys or imports or whatever, and trading them to craft. I still think that's in its essence, but at the same time, you're seeing copyright and trademark issues come up with amongst a lot of brewers. We've been involved in a few. You're seeing a little squabbles like that, and so yeah, it's definitely, and plus the definition of craft is being blurred from the big guys. Some of the brands that they've purchased, some of the brands that they're putting out as faux craft, some of the contract brands out there. All these different things is confusing for the consumer, so it is creating a little bit of a friction, and when you're in sales, you're competitive. So obviously, I want to be on over everybody else. So
even if it means taking off one of your friends.
No, I mean, I still think for me personally, I can't speak for everybody else, but for me, I think at the end of the day, the retailer is in charge and the consumer is in charge, and if they decide, and so if somebody's going to replace my beer with another great craft brewery because that's what the retailer or what the consumer was asking for, how can I be upset with that? We need to do something better.
You lost a line, so I mean.
But we need to do something.
Sales, right?
We need to do something better. So I mean, I can't be necessarily upset at the brewer that made that beer that went in my place. It's a perfect example, Chris. I used to go in a bar 6 or 7 years ago that would have like 12 or 15 taps. And I'd go in and I could pick out like 5 that shouldn't be on. I'd be like, man, this is a joke. Why do they have these beers on? Just 5 beers, period, out of the 15 or so taps. I go in that same bar today, and I look, and if we're not on draft, I look at, and I'm like, wow, I can't really fault them for their list. It's a really good list. So how can I be? It's because I haven't been in there enough, or because I haven't sampled them enough, or they just don't. They love Left Hand, but no one's come in and talked to them. So that's the different landscape. Is that there's a lot of good beer out there right now, and it's getting more crowded.
Right. You can't be everywhere at once.
No.
So how do we increase craft share as distributors and brewery sales reps? how do we take Greenville, South Carolina from a 5 share to a 10 share? I mean, even in Massachusetts, where we're based in Boston, craft shipments there were 17, 18% last year of the entire, beer landscape. So,
Plenty of room to grow, number one. One way to go is up. And the trains left the station in the fall of '09. Well, before then, craft beer was doing this. In fall of '09, it did this. In January of 2012, it just shot up precipitously. I don't know why. It could be millennials are coming of age, of drinking age. I know, well, for instance, when Sweetwater started, there were Gen Xers. And millennials now are twice that population. So that explains some of the growth, I would think, just the sheer population growth. But if a distributor hadn't caught that train, it left the station quite a while ago. And a lot of them are playing catch up, and they're taking on brands that they have no knowledge of or have no faith in, or just to hoard brands or just to try anything. It's more of an act of desperation. That's fine, but it doesn't build brands, and we end up usually getting the tap handles back. And also, when you're looking at brands, I really meant that when I said you have to have a gut feeling as a distributor. Not only that gut is also calculated off of what you see and read about at these festivals and all the buzz, but when you're deciding on brands, you just got to follow your gut to what you think you want to promote and build that brand based upon really just the buzz. And it's really hard this is a perfect example right here how long it took for them to grow. And I call the 100,000 barrel club. When you get in that level, they have a little extra pep in their step. These brewers, and it gets to a level where they have to have these national chain reps, and they have to spend more money. You see that, but they're making a lot of money at 100,000 barrels. At 30,000 barrels, they're making money. But I see it lately, when they reach 100,000 barrels, these brewers, to compete on the shelf, which is important, the package, to compete with the SPIM section, which is Heineken, Corona, Shock Top, Blue Moon, Sam Adams, and a handful of more. That's about 98% of the shelf space. So to get your brand on that shelf space, you've got to hire some heavy hitters that have the chain. And that's a whole different level from what we've been discussing tonight as far as a startup brewer. But I'm starting to see that 100,000 barrel club, and they're having to step up to the plate and compete against the larger batch brewers that are coming out with craft-like beer that the consumer really can't discern the difference.
So I'll offer up the final question then on that point. The last word for each of you can answer this. Is that 100,000 barrel club going to be then the club that really takes craft into the future and kind of propels the entire segment forward? Or is it going to be the 2,900 other small guys that are all local and really building this thing and nipping at their heels? Go down the line from Jason.
The political correct answer, which happens to be the answer I actually believe in, is it's going to be both. Because what's kind of cool about this 2,900 or however many breweries is you do have some small guys that are kind of like mavericks within the segment, and breweries like Sweetwater and Left Hand and Bell's are like the establishment all of a sudden, which is so crazy to me. It's like the band that sold out and got popular. But so you do have some of these renegades that are kind of keeping stuff alive and fun and fresh. But then, it's those regional brewers that are pushing. I mean, because like he was saying, we just hired our first national off-premise chain manager for that exact reason that he was just talking about. So you're going to see the regional breweries kind of push into that outer segment and maybe bring people in. But the great thing about craft beer is they're a very promiscuous drinker. Once they get in, then they start searching out other things, and then they're going to find some of the little guys and pull them up too. So there is some of that. It's just how we get there is really going to be curious.
I think, to kind of go back on the last question and answer this one, what's great about this whole craft beer movement, and I think what people mostly identify with as a consumer, is the ability to express yourself through your decisions and your craft beer choices. And on the retail side of things, that happens more so every day than it ever has. The big guys run national ad campaigns have Super Bowl commercials and blah, 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 but they're reaching a broad audience through generic types of advertising and whatnot. But like this becomes a way for people to express themselves through their breweries and what they have in common with them and how they relate to their stories and you know what I mean? And there's a lot more pride than there ever has been on what you drink and what's in your fridge. And so that's the future. That's how you expand craft beer is you start tailoring yourself to your niche, I would say that's kind of the summary for all of it.
The consumer's going to drive it.
The consumer is going to drive it, but the establishment is going to drive themselves to pull in the type of consumer, And it happens all the time, like with organic food. And I saw some statistic not too long ago that, the person who has craft beer in their basket in the grocery store is more likely to buy organic foods and stuff like that. And so their average checkout is considerably more, So as the consumer becomes more educated, there becomes more demand for it, and then you have chefs that are geared towards certain concepts, and beer that pairs with that, seafood concepts and saisons and yada yada yada. There's just you can tailor things to express the personality of that establishment, of that consumer, more so than you ever have been. And that will continue to be that way because this is the I generation, my iPhone, you know what I mean? It's all about the individual expressing themselves.
I think it's more basic. I think it's, I'm an old man, I'm 56, and when I grew up, there was a big difference in the flavor of beer. Beer had flavor. Believe it or not, lagers had flavor in the 60s and 70s. And you could tell the difference in a PBR, a Schlitz, a Pabst, and then Bud came along. But I think what you're seeing today is by decreasing the IBUs in the beer and adding so much water, and I'm talking about the big batch brewer, light American lagers, they've made the beer unpalatable. It's just something that has no flavor. Well, I shouldn't say that. It has flavor. I don't drink it. It's personal opinion, but I think the consumer is saying, I want beer with flavor. And the reason I say that, I go to a lot of beer festivals, and it used to be a lot of millennials there. Now you're seeing baby boomers, a lot of baby boomers. I feel young, even at the GABF now. So it's a combination of brand fatigue. They've been around for 25 to 35 years, American light lagers. It's just, forget the finickiness of millennials or wanting a choice and all that. They just want beer with flavor, and it's carrying over to baby boomers now. And they're drinking less, they're drinking beer with more flavor, and they're drinking less. And it's just that simple. Per capita consumption's going down, and all the emails I get and all the statisticians are saying that beer business is going to hell in a bucket as far as the next 3 years. It's just per capita consumption's going down, but not in craft. That is a whole different ballgame, but I'm just talking about overall consumption. I think the big guys are down 250 million cases in the past 5 years. So numbers speak for themselves. That's what the consumers, they're drinking better beer. That's simple.
I'll just add one more thing on that. Look at coffee industry. 20 years ago, no one really cared where their cup of coffee was coming from. You'd get it at the local gas station or whatever. Dunkin' Donuts had the premium coffee. Starbucks is the big driver, right? But there's a small independent roaster on just about every corner right now. And everyone in this room probably has their own individual coffee order. It's very similar to the beer industry, in my opinion. People seek, like Wes was talking about, and as Russell was talking about, seeking flavor. And beer, same way.
Well, speaking about seeking flavor,
Let's seek some flavors.
Let's seek some flavor at the bar for a few minutes, and then we'll bring up Freddie Bench and Dave Gunder from Sweetwater for a discussion. But thank you to these three. How about a round of applause? And pick their brains all night.